My conversation today is with author, practitioner, and teacher Nikki Wardwell Sleath. The author of several books on witchcraft, dream work, and the magic of seals, Nikki is also well known for founding the Society of Witchcraft and Old Magic, which is now known as the Wardwell Tradition of American Witchcraft. It was my distinct pleasure to sit down with Nikki to talk about her background in the traditions, as well as her latest book, Dream Sorcery, which reveals lucid dreaming as a metaphorical alchemical laboratory for the transmutation of magical practice. I'm Ike Baker, and this is the Arcanum Podcast. All right, I'm here with Nikki Wardwell Sleath. This is going to be a fantastic conversation this evening. We seem to be in lockstep with so many different things on, let's say, opposite ends of the magical spectrum, but not too far apart. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I really love these kinds of conversations.
We've known each other for a little while now, and we've seen each other in person at conferences, and we've had previous Zoom calls. But for those people listening to this episode, and let's say this is a bit of an introduction for some of them to your work, what started you on the path into your present practices of witchcraft, magic, and dream work?
Well, I've been on the path for a long time now. I've always been someone that's had a very vivid dreaming life, and I always just thought that having very frequent deja vu and episodes of what my mom used to tell me was my ESP and all that, I just thought that was just how everybody was. Oh, Nick, you have ESP, she'd say. And I just thought I was perceptive. I didn't think that it was anything out of the ordinary. Then, you kind of become a teenager and you're doing school and you go to college and you're doing life. And I forgot about spirituality. Wasn't really into the Protestant church I was brought up in, but I did notice that my psychic receptivity would become really acutely clear every fall. That was the thing that originally led me to do research with the search terms of effects of the seasons on psychic skill and things like that. And I was fortunate because the internet was just being born. I was fortunate to come across some sources at the time that adequately described modern day practices of the craft and the belief in, connectivity with the cycles and studying the mysteries through aspects of nature. And, I was hit over the head, with, oh my gosh, I actually am very spiritually motivated. I just hadn't found the in. I knew I was witchy for life. We can WFL that, I knew it was like a revelatory moment. So it was just those couple of years of noticing that pattern in my early 20s. And from there I started studying, and it's just been forever since. I have a bachelor's degree as a physical therapist. That was my original career, but then I knew a few short years in that I wouldn't do that forever. And so I started gaining, Reiki certifications and doing a lot of yoga and, Zen Buddhist meditation and all kinds of other things. And then I finally went back and got a master's in integrative health and healing. And ever since that point, because there were several different mentorships and stuff involved in that, that's where the dream work really blossomed too. That's what kicked off my working for myself 100%, running my own occult order. I was already teaching people before that, but then it became something that all of a sudden folks were crawling out of the woodwork, lining up. I had to figure out how to juggle it all, so I was able to leave physical therapy behind altogether. And now I've just been teaching and writing and doing readings and healing work and just occult work for a long time professionally at this point. So that's the story in a nutshell of the path.
Yeah, and I mean, again, that's another thing where it's like I also like I was going to school for physical therapy, and I don't know if we ever talked about that, but
We didn't.
yeah,
I probably didn't mention it before.
no, I don't think you did. Yeah, I was in school for physical therapy, and I too saw, I was working as a PTA in the middle of doing that work, and I realized I probably wouldn't be in it very long either, so I switched tracks into massage and body work, which led me to Chinese medicine and things like that. So yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, and what I really like about what you do is that you do come across very much so as someone who, through their practice, right? Because we can approach spirit, the divine, whatever you want to call it, we can approach it through different lenses, but I truly find the work that you've put out so far and the conversations that we've had, you are somebody who's engaged with the mysteries. You talk about studying the mysteries, you're engaged with them. Because for people that are listening, not everybody in what we do is engaged in the mysteries.
Well, I mean, I feel as though if one is to publish books about a topic, you should be a relative expert in that topic, hopefully through a decent amount of direct experience. I know you're right. A lot of people aren't. No, I'm very hands-on in a lot of ways. In fact, I'm so busy and I keep thinking every year, like, okay, where will I scale back? Will I take fewer clients? Will I take fewer students? But then I think, those experiences give me so much depth of continual learning as to what's possible. Every time I have another healing client on the table and I use all kinds of sorcery techniques and shamanistic approaches that I'm trained in and things, I always learn something else. I learn so much. So I'm loath to let go of that direct. I don't think I ever will. Yes, I'm directly engaged.
Yeah, and another thing that I wanted to point out, or let's say bring up, I read an interview that you did recently with Perseus Arcane Academy, and they're wonderful. They're wonderful. I really enjoy his work. Now, there's another piece of information that I gleaned in there that I didn't know about you, is that you have an ancestor named Samuel Wardwell, and I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, I keep my middle name or my maiden name, sorry, in there as my public persona because I want to honor him. So Samuel was one of the hanged in the Salem witch trials of 1692, Salem, Massachusetts. He's my direct 8 times great grandfather, straight down the line, all men, and then to me. And it was interesting because of the 20 folks that were hanged, there were obviously others who were accused, some of which got to be released because the trials ended. And I think someone famous's wife was accused, and it wasn't until that point and he was a politician, he was like, we shouldn't be doing this anymore. Like, oh, that's convenient timing. But anyway, so that, but it's famous because of the hysteria and how this big chunk of people were all killed in groups in one short period of time that year. And so Samuel was one of the only people in the records of Salem where the accusations seem to have been based on the fact that he actually liked to read people's fortunes with cards and had a skill for it. And also he would frequently know things ahead of time from dreams. Now, those happen to be my 2 biggest areas of skill for divination. So that's interesting. Like, is there a genetic, predisposition for the archetypal languages of the tarot and the dream realm? Maybe. But I feel like it's such an honor to be able to do magical work now in a time where, up until this point anyway, we've been very safe doing it, and the openness, every decade of my life that I've been practicing the openness around the craft and the occult has softened and become more accepted. So there's some sort of feeling of coming full circle with that ancestry for me.
Yeah, I can't remember now what exactly I was watching, but I was listening to a podcast interview with somebody talking about like the work that Dean Radin does, stuff about the scientific quantification and examination of stuff like Magick and ESP and things of this nature, which I full disclosure, I mean, anybody who listens to my podcast, and I'm not totally convinced that those two languages are ever going to sync up one to one, but I think it's that meeting ground is interesting. And one of the things that he went on this guy, I can't remember who it was. If I do remember, I will put it in the description of this video, a link to it. But he talks about how there may be some genetic, some actual sort of like evidence that these capacities, this, I guess the magnitude of your capacity is handed down genetically. It was very fascinating.
I mean, that resonates with me, that general idea, just because we do have different skill sets and constitutions. When you look at the diversity of people that I mean, some people are born with a predisposition to be good at certain things. Some people, just even in our personalities and the way that we tend to focus mentally, I find that I feel like my brain definitely functions differently than a lot of people around me in terms of mental focus and emotional regulation. I feel like, and that's, yes, I've worked on it, especially as an occultist who's kind of on a path of personal spiritual alchemy, but I am aware that there are certain predispositions with a relative diligence, a certain type of mental clarity that I've always had, even since a child. And I wonder, where is that handed down in the genetics? It's an interesting discussion for sure.
It certainly is. It certainly is. I know that my grandmother on my father's side, and this is not necessarily atypical for like rural Greece, but she used to read tea leaves and things like that, and then after she died, she appeared to several people as a ghost. So I'm hoping I get that predisposition. It just can just die and just appear to people. But speaking of, kind of on the subject of him having your ancestor Samuel having premonitions or premonitory dreams. Let's talk a little bit about your last book, Dream Sorcery. Can you tell us a little bit about how you approached that and let's say, one or two main messages that you want potential readers to glean from the work?
Well, yes. So my book, Dream Sorcery, The Ritual and Magic of Lucid Dreaming, came out early last May. And I think it's a very important work. Obviously, probably every author thinks the thing that they're making is important, but I have been an avid lucid dreamer for a couple of decades, and because of that, paired with my magical background and training, I realized quite readily that space is so underappreciated in the occult world. It's something that we actually all could be working on doing with very little effort or extra time put into our routines, but people are intimidated because it's not easy. It's the only place, while we are living and embodied, where we can truly experience what it feels like to move around as a spirit. I mean, talking about wanting to be able to be a ghost, that when you're in your dream body, but yet you are completely awake to who you are, everything about your physical life. there's no fear. And when you remember, like, oh, I was working on this particular sorcery skill, or I was trying to hone such and such ceremonial, magical ritual, or, I was trying to create a sorcery technique for this or do this divination, you can do it there. And it's so off the charts beneficial to the sorcery skill you bring back here. I just think in the occult world, we've missed the boat. And when you look, there's a lot of great lucid dreaming books out there, but they're all usually written from, the Western psychological vantage point, without going into the enchanted worldview of all that's possible in the realms of alchemy, in the realms of spirit contact, in even the theory that a lot of lucid dreams are pure out-of-body experiences. That's not really being addressed. And it's this tool that is crazy amazing. It's the most supernatural thing that you could do while you're alive, I think. And, to not at least give it a shot, I think is a shame for serious occultists anyway.
Yeah, and you're I agree with you. So much of my own spiritual life has been there's been mile markers that have only come in my dream life. And yeah, I think it's an incredible book. I read it when it came out last May, and we talked about it a little bit. You've got a ton of exercises in there, and it is actually quite satisfying for people. I think that people that are going to come to this stuff fresh and new and seasoned, wizened practitioners. You've even got stuff from like the PGM in there, right?
Yeah, I want to show people that are into the occult that there are actually resources that can be pulled in, to help you bolster a more robust approach to lucid dreaming. So the book really comes at it from both ends. I'm trying to give people, magical folks, all the tools they need to cultivate lucid experiences and lucid magic so they improve as magicians in waking. But I'm also trying to give them magic to do that helps them cultivate these lucid experiences, creating a virtuous cycle. So the things that you can do in that lucid space can directly impact how good you are, how effective you are at magic here in waking life. But you need to be able to cultivate those experiences, which has its stumbling blocks and challenges for people. So why not use the skills that we have at the altar, in ritual, with folk magic, all of the different types of magic that people like to engage? You can use those things. So yes, there are lots of spells and charms and things for seeking oracles and dreams and having clear dreams and prophetic dreams. So no matter what your lucid dream, priority is, there's probably something in there that you could adapt into your rituals. And that's why I bring some examples from the PGM into my book, but also grimoire seals from both, like the Key of Solomon, the Lesser Key, the Black Pullet, Raphael's ancient manuscript, talismanic magic. You think of some of these grimoires that we have laying around that we can easily get our hands on. And there are things in there that we can use to do magic to help cultivate a more lucid dreaming life. I think it's important.
Yeah. And it's very impressive, the breadth of awareness that you need to have in order to be pulling the grimoire stuff, to be pulling the PGM stuff, applying it to lucid dreaming. It's very much, I think, speaks to your experience and your wealth of study. But another thing that you and I kind of had in lockstep with our, I released a book in April, end of April last year, and it was kind of about, etheric magic. It was about utilizing or stratifying the energy bodies alchemically. And so you also had this sort of alchemical theory incorporated into dream sorcery. I think you even refer to lucid dreaming as the philosopher's stone. So how does alchemy, in that system, how does alchemy play into dream sorcery?
Well, a number of ways, but here's some of the big things that I think of with alchemy and lucidity Um, I look at the lucid dreaming space as the ultimate alchemy lab because there's a direct parallel, a metaphor between the idea of the alchemists trying to do these experiments of transformation. You know, we all know the tales of trying to turn lead to gold and Nicholas Flamel and did he or didn't he, and, you know, the elusive mysteries around that, and that it was a difficult thing to do, but that if we just had this one other substance, but we don't really know what it is, we'll call it the philosopher's stone. If we had that, then that would tip the scales and the experiment would be successful, and that's all we need. So the idea of why, right? Like, why did they want to do these things in the lab is that they realized that it takes millions of years for these precious substances to develop on Earth. And there's the concept that if you could witness the evolution of the original components or the vegetable matter that eventually became the mineral matter, if you could witness the entire process in person, that your auric field would take in that subtle wisdom and would elevate you. So that's the reason for doing it. You had to speed it up in the lab because we have these short, finite lives. We'll never be able to witness a process of that length, right? So that's why the experiment, because then you do get to witness all the stages from beginning to end in person. Kind of the same way where, you know, occultists talk about practical magical evocation and why it's so beneficial, because there's supposed to be, aside from conversations and magic you might do with the spirits that you evoke, I mean, just being in the presence, right? You know, if you talk about like, oh, we're supposed to work up from, you know, like evoking a lunar spirit and then a mercurial one and work up the tree so that we continue to elevate our own auric field by that very exposure. It's that idea of exposure and witnessing that is supposed to help elevate us. So in lucid dreaming, we get to do that. So we get to do things that here, the limitations of the density of these physics don't allow us to witness or do firsthand. So, you know, you have background in ceremonial magic, and I mention, you know, the simplest exercises of that in the book, such as the Kabbalistic cross or banishing and invoking pentagrams and things like that, signing, projecting. We have to coordinate here in waking in order to do those things. We have to coordinate our intention, our inner envisioning, the use of our breath, sound, intonations, the projecting of the energy from our auric field. And we have to imagine all of that coordinating together in order for us to learn to perceive the effect and to do it well. Because this isn't Hogwarts land, you know, we can't just always see what the stream of energy is that is being projected, you know, from our efforts. In lucid dreaming, you get to see it, feel it, see the effects it has on the environment or any people around, including yourself, 100% directly. So imagine that as you're doing that simple banishing pentagram to clear your space, that if you didn't, right now in your own room, like you didn't have to try at all, but sparks would glow, a whole stream out of your hand, and then that construct would hang in the air, and then you could see parts of the atmosphere clearing and fizzling, or, you know, the space being widened, or even the color of the energy in the atmosphere changing. You could see it. Because you're awake to who you are when you practice something like that in a lucid dream, once you wake back up, you still have every memory of those sensations. So then when you do it here, it's like I always say, it's just riding the bike that we don't have in physical reality. You get to ride that bike there, understand what it feels like. Now you have that memory. We all know what riding a bike feels like because we've gotten to practice it. But that's how it is with sorcery training in lucidity. You're so much more effective as a magician, and that's just one thing. But that's part of me looking at it as the alchemical lab. I do look at the things that you're able to work on there as being so limitless that personal alchemy, the spiritual elevation, so the metaphor that, okay, that witnessing is not just about turning base things to gold in the physical, but it's also about our spirit, right? And that became clear as we've studied all the old writings, that there were these parallels going on within the self, for those who were studying this art. And in order to be working on spiritual evolution, you can do things in lucid dreaming that you can't do here. You can directly confront your shadow. You can have conversations with all kinds of elevated guides and beings. And a big one, I mean, I used my skill in lucid dreaming to really actually get advanced information about my holy guardian angel while I was devising the entire plan of attack for, I did the whole thing in the usual waking world, physical ritual way. But I feel like my process was swifter and smoother because I already had conversation beginning because I summoned him there in that place as well. And summoning beings, all of these things help us with spiritual evolution. And the raising of our vibration in so many ways. So it's that personal alchemical process as well. So yeah. And then it was just odd. I had structured my whole book around that with, putting the basics as the salt and the foundations and the things that you need to really do on the physical plane in order to make this happen. Having the Mercury section be all of the spiritual motivations, the high vibrational things we can aspire to and that we can achieve. And the sulfur being the actions that we choose magically, which are sort of the transformational catalysts. And then, I was waiting for my book to come out. It was all done, and I had yours on pre-order because when I saw that come across my screen months before, I was like, I'm gonna need to read that. And I read your book and was like, interesting. Our books come out like 2 weeks apart. We've both got these sort of an alchemical structure to the teachings because it really is sort of a universal way of looking at the magical value of things and the components and the way that they weave together to create a virtuously forward-moving whole.
Yeah. And I sometimes will describe, first of all, I do want to say all of that was very beautifully put. That it's still mind-blowing to hear it back, that the realization of that, of like, hey, what I can do if I'm not wasting my time, well, it's not necessarily a waste of time, but if I'm not just letting myself go into unconscious dream state every single night, I can get a lot accomplished, especially with Magick. I think that is absolutely fascinating. But I wanted to know if you, well, before I move into something, I want to talk a little bit about do you give courses or anything like that on this stuff that listeners could be interested in? But before I ask that question, I will selfishly ask a question. For anybody that has been having trouble, let's say, as I have the past 2 or 3 years with lucid dreaming, just can't do it anymore. What are the first few things you could recommend for us to start moving in that direction?
Well, like I say in my book, you got to look at the components of the salt or the foundation and see what of those things you're doing well and what could be improved upon. So having the daily meditation practice, you're probably already doing that. The reality checking actually needs to happen a kind of obscene amount in order for it to really give you a predisposition. So when we're talking about reality checks, that is testing the nature of your reality. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that. And I suggest everyone find at least one physical reality check that you can commit to doing as much as you can possibly remember to do. So much so, the idea is that if you make it an annoying habit, then you do start to actually do things in your dreams that are habits from waking life. Like, I mean, I don't know about other people, but I freaking check my phone in my dreams. I look for my same person, my same car that I drive, and like a lot of things that are habitual in ordinary reality, I find myself seeking to try to do in my dreams. So if you make a reality check an annoying habit, eventually you'll do it in your dream, and then you'll be like, oh crap, I am dreaming. So reality check is something you can always up the game on that. If you're doing, the setting of intentions and the journaling of dreams and the reality checking, and you have a good meditation practice every day, and you feel like your present moment awareness skills are pretty decent, and you're still not having intermittent lucid dreams, here's the tough part. It's really important to schedule in the intermittent wake back to bed routine. Maybe once every 2 weeks or once a week. And that's the part that takes an annoying amount of willpower, because, the perfect time if you're someone like me who tends to go to bed between 10 and 11, the perfect time for the wake back to bed technique is 3 to 3:30, maybe 3:30, maybe up to 4. But after that, the window has passed, and before that, it's likely too early, because you kind of need a certain amount of sleep cycles to have already happened, and then you have to disrupt it, and that's the part that takes the gross amount of willpower. So you get up to pee, and you're like, oh, it's 3:30. Oh my God, I'm so tired. I haven't gotten nearly enough sleep yet. All we want to do at that point is curl back up. And we know if we just go to the bathroom real quick and then dive back into bed and get into that same warm spot, we'll fall asleep really quickly most of the time. And the willpower it takes to be like, okay, and I'm married, so my husband is in the bed. And if I'm going to do wake back to bed, that means I've got to I can't just turn on the light and kind of I have to get my journal and go out in the other room and turn on a light so I don't wake him up. So I will journal what I've got so far from my dreams, maybe read a little bit. Do not bring your phone with you for a wake back to bed encounter. Just leave that alone. That will ruin it. You want to journal, you could read. It's great to read a book about dreaming, because that has your mind on it. Stay awake for 30 to 45 minutes. Then it sucks, because it's harder to fall back asleep. And so that's where the willpower comes in. But there's that phenomenon that they call REM loading, which happens when you interrupt the sleep cycles in this way. And this is why the wake back to bed encounters are the best odds of cultivating a lucid dream on demand, because we are closer to the surface. We don't get down into that deep sleep when we fall back to sleep after having disrupted it in that way. And so we're closer to the surface, and it's easier for us to have certain sensations that help remind us to reality check and remind us of who we are, that we actually have a physical body, and that's not actually our normal physical reality that we're anchored into, and you can become lucid. Also, when you become lucid randomly in the middle of the night, like just the dream-induced lucid dreams, those are great, that they can happen. If you reality check enough, you can predispose yourself to having random accounts of those. Those are harder to hang on to, though. The lucid dreams you get when you do a wake back to bed process tend to be longer lasting, and you can keep getting back in over and over and over. Yesterday, I did a wake back to bed, and I was lucid repeatedly for 2 hours. So I got to get a whole bunch of my high priority lucid dream plans done, to the point where I didn't know what I was going to do next, and I was having a good time exploring, and I found this group of Magick users in one of the dream realities. So I started teaching them. I started teaching dream characters to lucid dream, and then and they were getting it. And a lot of times dream characters won't. and they were getting it, but then they couldn't do all the things. So I was then summoning their beloved dead. They'd tell me the name. I would summon the being, bring that person in, and then like deliver them so they could have a desired conversation. I mean, it's like the stuff you can do. I think I might be now in my lucid dreams practicing to be a dream guide later after this life. So you'll be a ghost doing fun hauntings, and I will be bothering people in their dreams.
Yeah. I will definitely be bothering people. I bothered people in life. I will bother them in death. That's so you in your dream you're teaching dream characters. Do you teach living people this stuff hands-on? Or do you have something where people can tune in on your website? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, at nikkieWardwellSleath.com is my main website, and all the stuff that I do is linkable through there. Most of the teaching that I've been doing for many years has been just private in my occult training order, Society of Witchcraft and Old Magick. I founded it 11 years ago. It's going very strong. Constantly got a lot of great students doing that sort of traditional magical training in American witchcraft. Mm-hmm. That is accessible to people from anywhere that are interested, but I only take new students in the fall each year. But I did just this past January of 26 launched for the first time ever a public Dream Sorcery online course. We're about halfway in, and I will probably have enrollment for that twice a year, because now that I've created the course, I can offer it at intervals. So basically what that is, it is sort of the depth companion to Dream Sorcery. So there are 9 core classes in that course where 3 of them are part of the salt and 3 are part of the mercury section and 3 are part of the sulfur, but they're spaced out so that in between each core you get a class, 1 week. On the first day you get the first class. The next week you get a Q&A video, so people get their chance to watch that class and do the activities suggested that I lead you in, and then they send their questions to me. And then, so the following week, on that same day of the week, I film a Q&A where I answer all and address all of their questions, and then they get that. So basically, you get 2 weeks to work with each core class. So then the next week, you'd get the second core class, and it goes through like that. So it's 18 classes altogether. And it's really going well on its maiden voyage so far here, so I'm sure that I will continue to offer it at intervals. And registration is closed for this current one because at this point you'd have too many videos to catch up on to feel like you were in the flow of it. But yeah, anyone is willing to follow me, on the usual social media places, and I always post when there's, a new registration for something coming up. Or just email me, and I could make sure to put you on an invite list or something.
And I'll have all those links right down in the description of this video. So go check it out. So I kind of want to segue into maybe the second act here of the conversation we're in the midst of. Again, we've both written a book that's coming out this year. Particularly dealing with mythology. So yours is a book of seals, right, on the Tua de Danann. Can you tell us a little bit about, for people that are not familiar with them, and this kind of context of working with them? Can you tell us a little bit about the Tua and how your book relates to them?
Yes. So we talked about how I appreciated Ike's proper pronunciation of the word. So it's what most people in America think of as the Tuatha, the tribe of original gods and goddesses to inhabit Ireland. So the mythology goes. So, but it is pronounced Tuatha or Tua. Tua is the most simple way for us to say it and still be in alignment with proper Irish pronunciations of that word. Tua actually just means people, or tribe of people. And Danann is a version of the name Danu. So really it means people of the goddess Danu. And so the story is, what's interesting that, speaking of mythology, because I'm curious to hear more about your forthcoming book as well, and it's weird that we're on these parallel paths. And also, like, we have the same editor. It's weird too, but maybe she's putting something into the ethers. But
Maybe.
So in the story of Ireland, there is no actual creation story, which is something that sort of sets it apart. In Irish mythology, the stories just act like this land has always been there. Like, this is just this magical place that has always existed. And it is said that Danu led the tribe of deities down from the north, quote unquote. That's all we know about where they came from the north. They sailed there in ships. And then, there's all of these stories about battling with different tribes over, who was going to be the rulers of this magical green emerald isle. And the Tua won for a while, until eventually in one of the later stories they lose, and they strike a deal where the other tribe will get to live on the surface, and they will have to go and live beneath the surface. And then you thenceforth have all of this lore about the mounds of the earth being entryways into the other world. The Tua are very interwoven with the idea of the Fae, and they're very fairy-like in their personalities and their skills and traits. And I mean, what are deities anyway, if not, extremely talented fairy or / non-human entities with, anyway. So it's very interesting. I love Irish mythology. Well, I'm biased because I've had long-term devotional relationships with some of the deities, especially the Morrigan, who is the ancient battle goddess of Irish mythology. But I also love how the story of the gods descending beneath the surface of the world, we don't really know what that means. We can't necessarily take it literally and think, oh, they live underground, right? Even though the people of Ireland then venerated these burial mounds, fairy mounds, as entryways or portals. But the nature of fairy is that it's this realm that exists parallel to or just beneath the surface of this one. So that's interesting to me. But with the whole thing with the land, and then there's, in such a small island, there are like thousands of geographical markers and places that are named after all these deities and heroes. There's this long tradition of the deity's energy literally assuming to be able to be embedded in the land. And so you can feel them very acutely through experiences with nature. And I have traveled to Ireland twice and done some cool magic at a lot of different sacred sites there. And that I've written about that in the book. But one of the things that I think is cool is that I'm also one of the co-facilitators of the Morrigan's Call Retreat, which is this event that happens annually here in Connecticut. I put it on. It was originally founded by Stephanie Woodfield, but she wanted to step back after a while because it's a lot of work, and she looked to some of us who had been involved to take it over. Anyway, that retreat that happens at a prior scouting campground in Connecticut, you can feel the energy of the Morrigan and the other Irish spirits that we have venerated there in the land. The land has definitely absorbed the energy of the sacredness and the intelligence that we've done so much channeling work there and all kinds of very intense ritual. You can feel it in that land. Like every time I drive away from that land, tears, I cry. I don't feel sad. I just feel this like separation from something very deeply magical. So the fact that embedding is possible, it's not just with the physical land. I realized that this connection to the Irish deities embeds really well in anything physically, including a book, a paper seal. When you're using a seal, you're using an image that's literally in front of you, whether you are drawing it yourself in your grimoire, or you can use a seal straight out of a book sometimes too. There's a lot of different ways that you can activate them. But as we discussed, I've studied a lot of old magic and a lot of the grimoires of antiquity and tried to understand how to bring the effectiveness of that magic into the current day. There's some people who are probably mad about that kind of thing because they think, it's not... I am not a fundamentalist, if we hadn't picked up on this yet. I am an innovator. I love to innovate magic. And I think it's important that we remember that, Solomon was innovating that magic, or anybody that was involved in it. John Dee and Edward Kelly, they were innovating that magic. They were channeling things that people now use as a system. There's no reason why those of us who are tapped into different spiritual intelligences and things cannot continue to innovate magic. So I learned the effectiveness of a lot of these old grimoire systems through direct usage. And then what was where's my... okay, this is great. I love how effective these Solomonic seals are. I love this. I'm doing it respectfully, but I'm devoted to these spirits from other pantheons that have nothing to do with the angelic and goetic spirits that one can call on with the grimoires of antiquity. So I wanted seals that called upon the legions of the beings that I feel most tapped into. And so I was able to do that. I did it first in the goddess seals, but I really wanted to make an Irish grimoire. So my goal with this book really is that it is a true grimoire in the sense that it is a book of spirit magic for the magician who likes to make actual contact, psychically or ritualistically, with spirits and have that sort of calling card. The calling card that the seal gets to serve as a sort of that connector of conscious intelligence to bring that forth into your magic in all kinds of creative ways. And so that is sort of the basis of the book, and it's so cool. So my endorsements were due today. My blurbs that you had. I know you were writing it's good I didn't know you were writing a book on mythology, because I probably would have asked you to. But I want to read a blurb that just came in because I got a bunch of the usual feedback that was really good, and the type of things that we have to do as authors when we're getting the front matter and stuff. But this one author went so out of her way to do a magical experiment. So she not only read it, but here's what she has to say. Seals of the Tuatha is an impressive grimoire of carefully constructed lore, spells, and effective spiritual technology to connect you with the energies and power of Irish legend. Sleath has worked up a compelling approach to utilizing the ceremonial framework of seals in contemporary paganism, and it yields consistent results. I used her guided pathworking for connecting to Bridget with two separate women's groups over 1,000 miles apart, as well as providing the accompanying spell work as a sort of double-blind experiment. I can confirm that these folks who have never had contact with each other or worked previously with this deity in any way revealed details of their independent experiments and experiences that mirrored those of the women in the other group. Several mentioned identical details of the scene and of Bridget that were not included in the meditative prompts, which stands out to me as a genuine affirmation of the validity of this technique. I enthusiastically recommend this book for everyone.
Wow, that's fantastic praise
Right?
and great work ethic.
I was like, when can we get together so we don't live near each other. I'm like, I owe you dinner or something because you really like that. She went above and beyond and actually took the magic to groups of people to see what would happen.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, that's incredible.
yes. Yeah. And so the seals are, and I'm thrilled because hearing these kinds of feedback before the book is even in the hands of the public, which is going to augment the powers of the seals more and more. The fact that they're already showing this resonance is amazing to me. And so another story, I gave a friend of mine an early copy of the Seal of the Dagda, who is another one of the deities of the Tua. She said that she was going to create an abundance working because things were tight. And I already had all of the magic around that seal agreed upon with him and consecrated and created. So I gave her the seal and the instructions. She involved it in her spell, and the following week, she just got a raise out of the blue, not in the timing of the company, not when they ever normally give raises or reviews or things like that, just because her boss, it dawned on him that maybe she deserved it. She didn't ask for it. So I was like, so needless to say, she's a big fan of the Dagda now. But, mythology like this is just amazing because I look at the deities as being currents of intelligence that exist in the universe with which we can interact and from which we can learn, but they can also help us move energies in ways that we can't do. That's why I like the spirit model of magic more than just the energy model of magic alone. I do lots of things to work on my energy body and stuff, obviously, like I was into your book, and doing things like that to work on the subtle bodies. But I think merging it with the spirit model of magic allows us greater results, because if we're only using the energy that comes off of our body and we think about possible ways the universe works, such as like energy out, energy in, or efforts out, yields received tend to have equal exchanges to them, then if we are putting something out that recruits the powers of legions that are greater than ourselves, then we get to put forth a much greater stream of energy and greater layers of sympathy than we can just do by ourselves.
Yeah, I think ultimately, if you've done this long enough, you take a pragmatic approach, which is basically to say, if it works, I use it. That is, if it works and there is a small margin for serious harm, then I use it. So I work with both. Which is interesting too, because I wrote a book on the energy stuff. I talk a little bit about the sort of consonance of where energy and the idea of a spirit meet. But yeah, ultimately, when I'm doing evocation or something like that, or invocation, I'm not thinking that the energy of this god is coming to me or anything like that. I conceive of it more like what would they call it, an entourage or an ontological hierarchy, this kind of stuff. So I'm excited to read this book. When does it come out, by the way?
It's coming out. It's sometime in the last quarter of this year. I haven't actually been given the exact month, but it's definitely going to be in 26.
Okay, awesome.
So pre-orders are not live on it yet, and I'll be sure to be posting and stuff, as soon as that's true. But I agree with you. I want to just remark on what you said. It's absolutely imperative that you work on your own energy body and on the way that, because there is a meeting in the middle. I mean, where there's so many theories about how in order to come, into really good co-creative space with different spiritual entities, we need to raise our vibration, and they might need to make theirs more dense in order to meet us in that creative space. So they're absolutely, for any occultist, I think you need to work on all areas, not just one or the other.
Yeah. That's a good point. Another thing that's interesting to me is like I'm just fascinated with etymology. I'm fascinated with linguistics. Linguistics. I'm fascinated with linguini. I'm very. I'm,
Hungry.
I'm half Italian. I'm always hungry. um, I'm fascinated with linguistics, and that is a big part of mythology. And so, yeah, there's some interesting crossover between what was going on in Celtic Ireland and actually in the ancient Mediterranean of the time that about the Iliad was supposed to be taking place, meaning the Battle of Troy, and there's a group or there's there's a group of warriors that come from what essentially is like the pan Greco world, which is a lot of people don't realize like Greek was not a nationality or an ethnicity back then. It was a language and a style of city state. And that was it, because these people were constantly warring with each other. But one of the groups of like sort of pan-Greco peoples that went to fight in the Battle of Troy are called the Danans. And actually in Greek it's Danai. So that's always been kind of interesting to me. Have you come across any of that cross-pollination before, or is it the first time?
Yeah, I don't know really anything about threads of commonality, from that part of the world in terms of maybe they made multiple stops, on their way before settling in Ireland. Who knows?
Yeah.
And then there's the whole Indo-European theory, that everybody just came from that central part of the world and started spreading out anyway. So when we think about it, it's really not that huge a distance, between what is the North, is it Scandinavia, or is it, was it Northeast, and they came down from some of the more like Slavic into the Mediterranean area. Like, who knows? I don't know. But it is cool to think about. And I also love language and linguistics. I'm a big word nerd, and it's one of the reasons why I like seal usage, especially seals that are consecrated and constructed with either their own channeled barbarous words of power or auditory sigils, or phrases constructed in the foreign language that relates to the culture of the spirits in question. I'm fluent in French. I love to speak. I practice it every single day for at least 20 minutes. And I don't know why I'm obsessed with it, but I've studied all the other, I spend time studying Irish. I spend time studying Norwegian and the languages of any of the spirits that I work with closely.
Right. That's excellent. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. So linguistics really ties into mythology and obviously magic. I actually gave a course recently called music as magic, and it had a module that explained how mythology is like central to particularly ancient forms of magic, because it would have technically at that time period been considered, if not completely, if not entirely within the wheelhouse of religion, then certainly religious adjacent, because you're working with these deities and you're working, you call them forth using their epithets, and recounting and therefore proving your knowledge of their mythological deeds and their mythological station and their cosmological functions and things like this. So myth and magic are so tied together for me that you really you suffer when you I think artificially kind of extract them from each other.
Yeah, and I think I crave it. I love the stories of mythology, all different pantheons. I just think maybe it's because, maybe everyone does, or maybe not, but maybe sometimes I just feel like growing up here in America, with the kind of spiritual proclivities that I have, I feel like we've been bereft of, if you're a regular, if you're not an indigenous Native American person, we don't have like a culture of myth that we were gifted with as children. We have fairy tales or whatever, but those came from everywhere else. And so I think I crave, feeling the archetypal wisdom of magic through myth and the spirits that are the teachers, of those stories.
Yeah. So have you got anything other than the book forthcoming? Are you doing any talks, etc., so on and so forth?
Oh yeah. I will be at Paganicon in Minneapolis in a few weeks, doing my lucid magician talk there.
Nice.
And then I'm also going to do a lucid alchemy talk out in Portland, Oregon at Spirit Northwest.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then that's in April. For those that may be out there on the West Coast. There are not a lot of spots left to register for the Morrigan's Call retreat because that sells out pretty quickly, but that happens if you like Irish magic stuff. You don't have to be a devotee of the Morrigan to attend that. You just have to be willing to do deep work with her intelligence, with her energy, with her stories, that kind of thing. That's in the first weekend of June in Orange, Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And then I've got a bunch of, smaller things happening. And then, waiting to hear about conferences that happen later in the year. But I like going all over the place and teaching about the things that about which I'm passionate right now. It just feels like a huge honor and a privilege to do so. So, I'm having a good time doing that.
Beautiful. So obviously we've come to the part of our conversation where I throw the canned question at you, and this might be catching you off guard, but for anybody that's listened to our conversation, we really have covered quite a fair bit of ground. Could you recommend 3 books for them to serve as introductions to really anything we've talked about? And you can recommend your own books.
Okay. So for dreaming, I'm going to go with that because I'm really vested in us becoming more of a dreaming society. I think it's our birthright. We need to be working this, and especially the occultists. So a book that was really crucial to me, and I'm biased because he's a mentor of mine, but Robert Moss's book, Conscious Dreaming. It's a great book for really just feeling into the energy of why it's important to wake up in a lot of ways, both to the nature of this reality as well as to wake up within dreams. So Conscious Dreaming is sort of his primer. He has got a lot of books that you can then veer down all kinds of different rabbit holes with, but that one is a great place to start. I also there's so many. You see, okay, we're also both sitting in similar environments here. Yeah. Books are like my problem, and I do think for the magical folk, my book, Dream Sorcery, is the one to read on lucid dreaming if you're going to really try to cultivate that, because there's no one else who's coming at it in that way yet in the published material.
I'll say this, the books that I did have on lucid dreaming, I gave away because your book covers everything and more.
Well, it takes our mindset, the mindset that we can be going beyond just our own brain. And that's important for magical folks.
Yeah.
I think I like this book. I'm going to mention this because it kind of touches a lot of areas, but I don't know if he pronounces his last name Lech or Leech. So the book Secrets of the Magical Grimoires by
Leech.
Aaron Leech.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like Leitch. I wasn't sure how he pronounced it. I've never met him in person. That book I really enjoy if you're someone who wants to study the old grimoires more and get more into things like seal usage and ceremonial ritual magic, but you're intimidated. He really does a nice job going back through history and talking about how all of those approaches are actually quite shamanistic in their origin, and that this is a commonality running through the magic which can be brought forth into the current day as long as you understand it. And I think books like that are really instrumental, so that'll be my answer for today. Those 2 dreaming books.
Yeah.
And that book to help us bridge the magic to our spirit model of magic and our grimoire usage.
Perfect. And don't forget, anybody that's listening, to check out Nikki's website, where she'll keep you all updated in the description of this video. Nikki Wardwell Sleath, thank you so much. This is a wonderful conversation. You're brilliant. I really love talking to you, and I'm looking forward to your next book and all the further work that you have to do.
Yeah, same back at you, and thank you so much for having me, Ike. It's really refreshing to be able to have conversations at this level and, to have folks who want that. So thanks, everybody.